right. Hi. Thank you for the introduction. Again, I am Christian Peters, and I am a second-year PhD student at the University of Florida. And today, I'm going to be talking about SS7-based attacks and our system designed to detect SS7 redirection attacks called Sonar. So, I'd like to start out by playing a game. So, say you work for an intelligence agency, and you need to intercept a call. How are you going to do it? Well, you might think, climb up the phone pole. However, most people don't use landlines anymore. You could deploy a cellular interceptor or stingray. However, these are cumbersome and require you to know the exact location and go to where your target is. But what if we could have the network do this for you? Well, this is entirely possible and can be done through functionality built into the global telephony network. Now, to explain that, why this is even possible, we look at signaling system 7. Now, SS7 so what it does is, it is responsible for communicating between multiple telephony networks. Now, SS7 allows most core elements to redirect your call as a feature. Now, this may sound a little strange at first, but there's actually a legitimate reason for this. So, cellular phones move around, including roaming between networks. And call forwarding allows even static phones to operate in other networks. Now, these are things that people expect to have from their telephony providers. So, SS7 is also a global infrastructure, and it was built on the assumption that only a small trusted parties would have access. Now, because of that, there is no authentication for requests. And this is no longer the case, though. So now, anyone can have access to SS7. And these vulnerabilities have been known about for decades. So you may ask, well, wait, why does this matter? If we've known about these vulnerabilities, why haven't we done something about this? Well, a few years ago, you may remember there was a 60 Minutes segment on SS7 attacks. And people from our community were even interviewed in this and showed that anyone can be attacked via SS7, including California Congressman Ted Lieu, who has done an excellent job pressing the FCC to make changes to fix these attacks. So maybe you don't even think that you're affected by this because you don't use 20th century technology anymore. Well, even if you completely have abandoned the telephony network and 20th century financing, you still are affected by this. So this is a problem that affects everyone. So a key insight here is that SS7 redirection attacks always add distance. So because of that, if we can detect significantly longer routes, we can detect these attacks. Now, in an IP network, endpoints have tools such as ping and traceroute that allow you to do this. However, the telephony network don't support these features. So between any two telephony networks, the only channel that we can guarantee is audio. So great. Let's just send audio, measure the round trip time, and call it a day. However, it's not that easy. And to explain why, we look at our adversarial model. So, an attacker who has access to the SS7 network can do the following. They can redirect incoming and outgoing calls for any arbitrary number. They can also arbitrarily modify the audio. This means adding noise or dropping packets. Also, the adversary knows the physical location of their target with high accuracy. Now, we make our adversary so strong because we assume that our attacker can attempt to mimic the correct latency. Now, we also say that an attacker cannot control the endpoints. And the reason for that is there's no reason to perform a redirection attack if this is not the case. So if an attacker already controls the endpoint, the game is over. So we look at acoustic distance bounding here. So we rely on distance bounding protocols that are very familiar to our community as well as the wireless community. Now, the challenge here is that distance bounding protocols are generally for two devices in a single hop network. However, we're using this in a different case. So what we're doing is we are using distance bounding protocols in not only a multi-hopped network, but in a multi-hopped audio channel. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here either. There are many great distance bounding protocols out there. So we rely on the work of Hanke and Kuhn and use a variation of their distance bounding protocol for what we need. So their protocol implements a technique called rapid bit exchange. And what that does is that allows a prover and a verifier to exchange bits, and from that, tightly bound the distance between one another. So one consideration we have to make is the differences in telephony networks from IP networks. And this comes in terms of delay. So I'd like to ask for participation once again. So sometime after the talk, borrow a phone and call your own phone. Speak into one end and listen into the other. What you'll notice is there is a significant delay between the time you speak the words and then the time you hear them on the other end. This, in telephony networks, is known as mouth-to-ear delay. Now, mouth-to-ear delay is made up of a variety of things. So in telephony networks, you see the same delays that you would see in a traditional IP network. So you see queuing delay, transmission delay, etc. But in telephony networks, you also have additional delays that can add up to hundreds of milliseconds of delay. So this is things such as analog to digital conversion, and transcoding delays, and codec delays. And this all adds up together. So the short story here is that end-to-end delay is significantly greater in telephony networks than in IP networks. And if you don't believe that, try the demonstration for yourself. Call yourself with another phone after the talk and experience the mouth-to-ear delay. And then compare this to a ping for two devices on a local area network. Now, I'd also like to note that if you do participate in the demonstration, standard calling rates do apply, and we are not responsible for any charges incurred by participating. So, our hypothesis is redirection attacks increase overall distance and therefore increase latency. So how do we confirm this intuition without actually launching this attack? So SS7 redirection attacks in most places is illegal. And in addition to that, we don't have access to SS7 directly ourselves. So we had to construct a testbed that best models this SS7 redirection. So in our lab, we constructed a VoIP client, and that would communicate with a audio loopback device on the GSM network. Now, the VoIP client, we would first redirect this to a VPN server at selected locations throughout the world before having it come back to our lab and be sent onto the telephony network through a GSM gateway. Now, we tested this, and we saw with an initial test that in the case of a call from our lab in Gainesville, Florida, to Boston, the latency of the call was smaller than that of a call from our lab to Boston that was first redirected to a VPN server in London. So we knew at this point that our hypothesis was, in fact, plausible. So we moved on to larger scale testing. So what we wanted to do was take round-trip time measurements with varying the location of the loopback device as well as the location of the VPN servers. So in order to move this loopback device, we had to construct our own hardware that allowed us to directly interact with the audio channel of calls in the telephony network. So we constructed this and sent this to our friends and family throughout the country, and we thank them very much for their help with this, as this research would not have been possible without them. So what we can see on this map here is that all of the orange stars specify the locations that we sent a GSM loopback device. All of the white stars represent locations where calls were redirected via VPN servers. And the blue stars indicate locations where both occurred. Now, when selecting VPN servers, we wanted to select servers that had a variance in great circle distance, as well as covered these 6 continents, not including Antarctica. And what we saw from this is that if you have an approximation of the distance the call travels, the proper latency can be estimated here, because we see that there is a trend in call distance to mouth-to-ear delay. Now, we also address the consistency of our results, because we know that internet routes can vary wildly, and maybe you're wondering about that. Well, we took 3 sets of data of calls from our lab to Boston, and what we saw is that the time was consistent here. Now, what we're talking about here too is not call setup, but actually once the call has already been set up. So once the call has already been established, it operates in a circuit switched fashion. So consistency is expected here. And what we saw is that the variation was actually very small. It was only in the order of about 10 milliseconds. And that is within 1 to 2 GSM audio frames. And our other experiments showed similar results. So though our simulations were nice, we wanted to see if we could detect actual redirections. And we were stuck on this for a while, until we partnered with our friends at the Israeli telecommunications security startup Valto. And they work with US telecommunications companies, which allow them to perform SS7 redirections to a single location in San Francisco, California. Now, they allowed us to execute actual SS7 rerouting attacks on ourselves. So what we did was we looked at the latency of calls that were from our lab to our co-author's lab in North Carolina that were first redirected to San Francisco. Now, also to our knowledge, we are the first academic team to conduct a real SS7 redirection attack and observe it. And what we saw was that there was a significant difference between the round-trip time of the attack calls versus the non-attack calls. Now, the attack calls are 28 to 29 standard deviations away from the mean latency of the non-attack calls. And because of this, we detected 100% of the SS7 redirection attacks against ourselves. So, like all research, there are limitations. So, small changes in distance may be lost in the noise, and we readily recognize this. So, this is a classic granularity problem in distance bounding. And this is only made worse by the fact that we're using distance bounding in a multi-hop environment and an active network. Now, traditional distance bounding gives centimeter accuracy, and as we mentioned earlier, GSM audio frames are approximately 20 milliseconds, and that's the best granularity that we can provide. So, a single measurement is also good for approximating distance, but not for location. So, geopositioning requires additional measurement points and triangulation, and there is no intuitive way of doing this in this context. However, this is something that we are looking at in the future. So, in conclusion, I explained how an attacker can use the telephony network and easily redirect calls via SS7 from anywhere in the world. Whether you're concerned about the privacy of your phone calls or the integrity of your Bitcoin wallet, these attacks affect you. We address the SS7 redirection attacks and use end-to-end distance bounding protocols to detect significant redirections of calls. We simulated this with a wide array of geographically diverse locations, as well as performed real SS7 attacks on ourselves and tested our system against it. Now, much still remains to be done in this space, as we only address one of many possible SS7 attacks. There still needs to be solutions for SMS two-factor authentication attacks, as well as localization tracking in SS7. And with that, my name is Christian Peters. I'm a second-year PhD student at the University of Florida, and I'll take your questions.
So I have a question. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about the factors that impact the attack? You had a little bit about it on your limitation slide, but if you can get a little bit into more details.
The factors that affect the attack, like
yes.
the...
Yes.
Okay, well, some of the factors that affect the attack is where the call gets redirected to, so how far off the call path the call goes. So if an adversary were to redirect to a very nearby location, it is harder to detect that because of the fact that less time is introduced. As we said, distance correlates to increased latency.
Hi, I'm Christina Pepper from NYU Abu Dhabi. My question actually goes in the same direction that Christina just mentioned. So I'm wondering if you can give me more insights into the possible locations of an attacker. So I guess if an attacker is kind of close to the original path that the call is basically taking, then it would be harder to detect the delay because there is not so much delay introduced. So what are the ranges, how far, so basically how far does an attacker need to be away so that you can reliably detect that?
So that's a great question. So it is fairly difficult to directly map the cellular network, and it's hard to really say an exact distance. But what we have done with our studies is that with our simulations, we were able to still detect attack calls that were placed from our lab that were first redirected to Atlanta and Miami, which is about 300 miles away. So we can still detect those attacks from our simulation. We also know that in an actual attack, more latency is introduced. So again, if we were able to actually run our attack for more, real attack for more locations, we'd be able to better quantify that. But still, it is a very hard thing to say exactly how much distance you'd have to be away.
Right. Just very short, is there kind of ongoing investigations that you're planning to do along with the industry collaboration that you have set up?
Yes, we'd love to continue doing this. We'd love to get additional attack points. If anyone in the audience would be willing to allow us to attack their device, please speak with my advisor, Dr. Patrick Traynor, and he could talk with our IRB.
Yeah, hi, Phoebe Rouge from the Federal Trade Commission. And this is great research. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
My question is, on individual calls to the same location, are there, I'm just worried about false positives here where a given call that may legitimately be redirected along a different call path because of the vagaries of the system. Like on an individual path at the same time, did you test to see, okay, it's always going to be within a certain bound? And then, because I could imagine that potentially there's a legitimate redirection of that call path.
Yeah, that's a very good question as well. So we verify our results against both historical data, and we consult the ITU E-model, which it basically outlines what typical call latency should be for a guaranteed good user experience that we see within the telephony network. So we actually achieve a very low false positive rate because of this, because we know exactly what we're supposed to be seeing, regardless of where the call is going. We know that.
Cool, thank you.
I think we are done, so maybe we can thank our speaker.